The NHS in England is ruling out Martha's Law from April to give patients and families access to an urgent second opinion if they are worried about a condition getting worse.
Yes, Martha's Rule is named after 13-year-old Martha Mills, who developed sepsis and died even while she was under the care of King's College Hospital. Now, her parents had raised numerous concerns about their daughter's health.
The registrar who was on duty insisted to me it was an allergic reaction to some antibiotics. I grabbed a nurse and I said to her, I'm really worried he's got this wrong. I'm really worried this is a sepsis rash. And she said, trust the doctors, they know what they're doing.
The trouble is, the doctors didn't seem to know what they were doing. And Merope is now in the position where, instead of having her daughter, she sees a rule being rolled out in her daughter's name to prevent this happening to anyone else. So the Health Secretary, Victoria Atkins, joins us now. This is an incredibly important principle. I wonder if you can just explain to any other patients in hospital right now who might be frustrated with the fact that their concerns about their relatives' care are not being listened to, how Martha's Rule might change the situation for them. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, thank you, first of all, for publicising this. This is such an important step forward for patient safety, and it comes from such tragic circumstances as we've just seen. But Merope and Paul's determination is that no other family should have to go through the horrific tragedy that they have had to go through. And so what this will mean is that we are rolling out across England a service whereby parents, relatives, loved ones can ask for a second set of eyes, if you like, to look at a patient if they're worried that their physical condition has deteriorated, to ensure that the diagnosis is accurate, that nothing has been missed, and that the patient is getting the very best care available. Because it is such a big change, we are having to do it in a stepped approach. So we will be rolling it out to the first 100 or more hospitals over the next couple of months. But I am determined that we will roll this out to every hospital in England because I want every family and patient to have this second service should they need it.
So just to establish, because of course, I think up until now, parents, relatives have been able to ask for a second opinion. Does this enshrine in some way in law a right to an independent second opinion?
So we haven't, we're not changing the law at the moment because I want to get this out as quickly as possible. And as we've discussed many times when I've been on the show, sometimes sadly legislating can take a very long time. I want to roll this out as quickly as possible. We will keep it under review so that if it becomes, if it becomes clear that actually we need to put some regulations in place, I will have no hesitation in doing that. But I should give credit actually to the medical community because both Merope, when I was speaking with her yesterday, and indeed my department, have been contacted by trust executives to ask how they can be part of this. So I think there is a groundswell of opinion that supports the principles behind this. And crikey, every clinician wants the very best for their patients, but supports the principles behind this to ensure that patients are getting the best care they can.
Victoria Atkins, I don't want to undermine our incredible staff in the NHS, but in Martha's case, she didn't get the absolute best care. That is the reason why you're making this proposal or this rolling out this rule today. Merope told 3 different consultants that she was concerned and got told this was just a normal infection. It wasn't. It was sepsis. It was a life-threatening condition. And we now know that if she had been listened to and the consultants had taken notice of what the child's mother was saying, because the child's mother knows their child better than anyone other than the father, she was told it was a normal infection. She asked a registrar why there was a rash which looked like a sepsis rash. The registrar said it was an allergic reaction. She went to a nurse and said, I'm really concerned about the care of my child. And the nurse said, trust the doctors. That was the problem. She trusted the doctors. So I'm just trying to establish what what changes with the rule being rolled out? Because it's very nerve-wracking sometimes when you're in a situation where multiple medical staff are telling you, you're wrong, we're right, trust us, but they are wrong. So if things had been different and under this rule, would Merapy have been able to say, I want an independent consultant from another hospital to come in and determine if you are giving my daughter the care that is going to save her life?
So that is exactly what we want to achieve, because I accept everything that you've just said. And so the way that this will be implemented is that there will be, at the moment we call them critical outreach teams, but there may be different models in different hospitals, because again, this has to be led locally and we need to make sure that it will work locally. But it will be a completely new set of clinicians who will look at the patient and cast an eye over those medical records, but also, of course, look at the patients themselves and, what is more, listen to relatives. So I'll give you another example. People may have elderly patients in hospital at the moment who suffer from confusion. That's part of their conditions. A family member may well know what, if you like, a normal level of confusion is, and so can help clinicians understand when an elderly patient is far, far worse and the confusion has deteriorated. It's those sorts of nuggets of information which, sadly, we know from Martha's case, but others as well, that those nuggets of information sometimes or occasionally do not get the attention they deserve. And this is what this is about. It's about giving parents and families and indeed patients themselves that voice and that expectation that they will be listened to in that environment. We all understand A&Es can be very busy, very hectic places, but for the care of that individual child or that older relative, the family will want everyone focused on them, understandably so, and this is what Martha's Rule is about. It will apply, I should say, not just in A&E departments, of course it would apply elsewhere in the hospital as well, but it's about having that route for patient voices to be heard, for relatives' voices to be heard and to be taken seriously and acted upon.
Of course, Health Secretary, is in no way to undermine what you're doing, to point out that there's currently 7.6 million people who are waiting for a first opinion on their treatment on waiting lists at the moment. We know that that's because, in part, the COVID backlog. We've been watching the harrowing ITV drama Breathtaking. We're talking in a moment to Dr. Rachel Clark, whose testimony that's based on. Now, I'm not seeking with you now to relitigate exactly what happened 2-3 years ago. That's for the public inquiry. But could I ask you this? If there was now a new pandemic in Britain this year, could you tell us the one or two vital things you've learned as Health Secretary which you would now do differently to what happened 3 years ago?
Well, Ed, as you'll appreciate, no country quite foresaw the COVID pandemic. Sure. And so I have already chaired meetings on this. We have meetings to determine pandemic readiness, not just for a COVID-type illness, but for the many other forms of illness that could, if situations.
So what's one or two things you would do differently? Well,
the problem is if you were to sit down with some of my medical advisors, there will be different reactions to different conditions. So I'm afraid this is not a piece of work that can be distilled. Even though I try to on your programme, I can't distill it into a sentence or two because that does not do justice to the huge swathe of work that goes on day in, day out across the UK HSA.
If there was another pandemic, do we have enough PPE right now to protect our NHS staff?
Well, what we try to do with PPE is to make sure that we have a dynamic purchasing model. In other words, that as we know from our conversations, we have finite resources in the NHS. I want to use them as well as I possibly can on the issues. If I may just finish, Ed, please, this is important. I need to use them as well as I possibly can for today, this year. But we have a dynamic model for that to ensure that we can ratchet up, because we know, it was no surprise to anyone when there's a worldwide pandemic, the world demanded PPE, and understandably so. So it was that market that we were operating in.
I asked your predecessor this question 3 months ago. He gave the same answer as you, which is he didn't have an answer. I think people would just be reassured to know there was something you've learned which you'd do differently.
No, Ed, that's not fair, if I may. I don't think that's fair. First of all, as you say, there's a COVID inquiry ongoing. I'm not going to preempt the findings of that. But in terms of our readiness for the future, this work is very much ongoing. And as I say, there are a range of ways in which a pandemic could land. I don't want to worry people at home, but we have very much taken on board the need, not just actually in health, but across government, the need to be prepared for pandemics. For example, in the Home Office, I was the Home Office Minister at the time looking after victims of domestic abuse, and we have massively changed.
You have to go, Health Secretary. We're being shouted at. We have to leave it there. Thank you ever so much. You have to go. Thank you so much for coming on the programme.